emerging designer perspective? And then have we got any students in the room? No? Okay. So I want to start the ball rolling with really the main purpose of what we're here to talk about. And I'm going to aim my first question at Trudy. I want us to talk about what does it mean to be circular? How do we think about the end at the beginning of the product cycle? And I think Trudy is the perfect person to start the ball rolling with that question.
Is this working? Hi, I would like to actually propose that there's something beyond circular, which is spiral, but I'll first talk about circular. We, in the last, I would say, 10 years or so, have been focusing on zero waste in fashion and how to kind of, reduce the fast fashion aspect or the detrimental cycle of the fabric due to fast fashion. And my background is architecture, where we have been on board or online with material stewardship in a completely different way for a really long time. So for me, it was interesting. I was doing zero waste convertible furniture before that and decided I was going to take the same material strategy and apply it to clothes. So essentially what makes my pattern, one particular garment where I have leftover, it's a T shape. Every time I cut that T shape, those two pieces that are left become something else, and it doesn't become the garment until those things become something else. So that's a way to get to zero waste, apart from just wearing, or apart from just using rectangles, which is mostly what ends up happening outside of that. But I think the closing of the loop is the first step, but actually seeing how you can piggyback other products and other techniques of making, or for that matter, taking fabric and donating it to somebody who's going to turn it into something else. That's another way of being able to complete the circle.
Anyone got anything to add to that? No. Okay, so my next question is about how we recycle, what it means to recycle, and in terms of not just your finished garments, in terms of from a designer's perspective, how are you recycling the finished garment in terms of the material, the components, and the whole package? I think it's a really important thing that we're learning about now, and it makes a huge difference to obviously trying to solve this huge problem of waste and reducing landfill. So Bridget, we're going to come to you for this one.
Okay. Well, my brand is, I'm kind of scared to say, but 100% sustainable. And the reason why I say that it is because I am only using already made garments. So I'm not buying, I'm not producing anything new whatsoever. So I'm taking something old and then I'm turning it into something new. So, fast forward, we have a million names for everything now. When I first started, it was just eco-friendly. Right now, what I do can be considered reconstruction, upcycling, recycling. So there's a bunch of names for it. I actually have the different ways that I guess I'll show you guys. But what I do is, this is a piece that was a donated sweater, and it just had a hole in it, that's all, and someone threw it out. And so I took a vintage piece and I covered the hole and opened it up and turned it into a jacket. So, now I can say that I used to shop or thrift to make my pieces, but I've been doing it so long now that I don't even have to shop. Now my pieces are donated, so I'm not even buying for my product. So I'm about as sustainable. That made 3 different pieces from one product.
That's lovely.
So that we call zero waste because every bit of it was used. And then we have what you would call as upcycled, which is the shirt remains exactly in the same way that it came. But then I added the artistic face and I added the remnants from the t-shirt to create a puff sleeve. So now it's an upcycled piece, but it's still the top that it came as. And lastly, you have a complete reconstruction, because this was a 1950s coat, and then I turned it into a pair of shorts. So that's a complete reconstruction, because it started as one thing and it ended as on something else. So basically, I bought the examples just really to just hit on the point that recycling is 100% possible for everything that you have at home. There's nothing that can't be recycled. And I just think that once everyone's more aware of the possibilities that you can do with your clothes, I think people will look at things differently and they'll be able to shop differently. So I think we're at maybe 15% of all the things that go to landfill are being recycled, when it could really be about 85 technically. So we just have to do better with what we do with our clothes once we're finished with them.
I'm having showcase envy. I totally forgot to. I have somebody in the audience, and I actually have stuff here. Ghislaine, sorry.
So this is the product that Trudy's been working on that she wanted to show to explain.
Totally.
There's actually two, well, 1.5, someone else is here.
So essentially what I failed to mention, which I often do because I'm talking just about sustainability, is that the idea is that you can wear this. It covers the woman's body cycle from teenager through pregnancy through hot flashes. You change it however you need to. And the piece that I'm wearing is actually what I'm going to put on her. So the concept was any hole you get into, it's going to be an outfit. And so that's essentially what I'm wearing as a shrug, and she's wearing it this way. And so pretty much everything goes inside out, upside down, right around town kind of thing. And yeah, and so I just wanted to share that as part of the, but as part of the bigger concept, because what Rick and I from BK Style, where's Rick? Okay, we're actually, I believe that all kids should be learning how to think like architects in terms of material stewardship, in terms of like, you know, this is actually a space and what happens in this space outside of that. We're working on curriculum to do some of that stuff, hopefully starting in April. Is it April? Yes. So this idea, for me, the exciting thing was that it was scalable and teachable to others. So that way I can buy this stuff from other people as well as kind of, you know, just, you know, make sure women actually have what they need all the time without a heavy suitcase, really.
Amazing, definitely inspirational for a lot of young designers out there about how to train. Great, thank you. That takes me nicely on to actually the next part of what I want to talk about, which is fibre switching. So obviously, you know, nowadays there is so much more availability for students to learn about fibre and what sustainable fibres are and what they mean. Having Andrea here today is brilliant because she can give us a bit of insight into what it means to fibre switch. What are your options if you want to be a sustainable designer, and where you can find those resources, and you know what challenges may you potentially face when trying to move away from the mainstream into a more sustainable option.
Great, thank you. I think it's interesting, we're kind of in the golden age of textiles at the moment. There's a lot of textile innovation coming about. And I think when we're deciding what textiles to use, we're first identifying what product we're going to make. For instance, I'm working with a woman who wants to make an undergarment, panties, and we were thinking about all different textiles. And one of the most sustainable textiles now is hemp. But do you necessarily want your undergarments to be hemp at this point? Maybe not so much. Luckily, we were able to go to a wonderful woman, Tara St. James. She has her source library where you can go, and she's going to show you textiles that are more sustainable. And I say the word more sustainable because we want to make sure that we're using, there's always room to grow. And I say that because we're always learning more. I remember when bamboo textiles came out and I said, I'm gonna throw away all my clothing and now I'm only gonna wear bamboo. And then the next day I find out how many chemicals it takes to process bamboo and how bad it is in other ways. So as soon as we learn something, it changes, so we constantly have to learn. So we've decided to go with this candy company using Modal. So we can use wood pulp to make fibers now, which is really interesting. And a lot of this textile innovation is actually coming from Italy, which is really exciting. You can now make textiles from orange peels. You can grow textiles at FIT. They were using kombucha to grow a leather type substitute. So now we can look at leathers and we can use mushroom, we can use pineapple. So I encourage everyone as they are deciding what collection they're going to produce to reach out to these resources and find out what alternative textiles are available and really support them because they're small, they want to create more innovation, but they need support from the community to do so, and they're willing to work with young designers. And I just briefly want to mention, because it's not just about natural, organic, synthetic is still an option, especially if we're using recycled polyester. And I just want to say that the reason I say that is because we can't just look at ourselves as, I'm an organic cotton customer. I don't wear leather. I shop based on my different needs. So perhaps I'm gonna go vintage for a jacket. Perhaps I'm gonna go fair trade or organic for undergarments. Perhaps I'm gonna go brand new polyester in my workout wear, because I've noticed that if I have leggings that I'm working out, and I got these beautiful fair trade 100% cotton organic leggings, and after a year, they start to get little holes in them. But those Nike secondhand polyester are probably gonna live 10, 15 years. So what's more sustainable in that sense, it's not always necessarily going for the most organic thing, but it's deciding how you're gonna use these things, how long you're gonna use these things, and even going back to, we can look at water consumption or carbon emission. A lot of times water consumption and carbon emission are lower for synthetic fibers because we're not taking into account the animal that had to live or the crop that you had to grow to produce these textiles. So we really got to think deep about this, and luckily I teach at FIT and LAM, and there are these courses that you can take that really help you dig into this information.
Brilliant, that's so so Zam, again, I'd like to aim this next question at you. What do we think are some of the biggest challenges that young emerging designers face today when planning and sourcing for their sustainable ranges?
Good evening, everyone. I will. Good evening, everyone.
Oh, that's not the word.
I think you have to put it right up to your mouth.
Good evening, everyone.
There you are.
Yeah, I will answer the question, but I wanted to, if I'm allowed,
Yeah.
to touch on a couple of things that was said earlier that I think that I would like to
Go for it.
have made a contribution to. So what do I do first? Do I answer the question first and get back to that, or do I?
Give your comments on the previous questions first.
Oh, okay. I'm listening to the panel, and everyone is making a valid points, but coming from somewhat different perspectives. And in a certain sense, it's saying that there is a variation of approaches to the whole process of sustainability. Like, Trudy did. No, Bridget spoke about using vintage pieces and extending their life in a sense by making new things from them. And Trudy spoke about, the versatility of the garments that she made, which she didn't mention this, but I think that if you have versatile garments, it would put you in a position where you can afford to buy less. Because something that does one thing also does another, and there is no need to fill that hole in your closet. I approach it from a very different perspective where I'm constantly trying to make new products. I don't use vintage garments and stuff like that. I make completely new products, but I use a lot of vintage fabrics. Like I have fabrics that are 30, 40, 50 years old. I actually remember once there was a company in Jamaica that made drapes for the British royal family. And the company was closing down and they had a lot of these nice cottons and silks and stuff, and I went there and bought everything. I still have some of it in a room in Jamaica that I occasionally have brought here to make products. I have some hemp garments that were made from a hemp that was at least 46 years old. I don't know how old it is, but I know it's at least 46 years old because the people that I purchased it from, that's how long they had it. And so, like for example, something like this, which is like an organizer, is made from the leftover fabric that we use, the leftover leather that we use to make leather jackets. So we don't throw it away, we try to make little accessories from it to minimize the waste. And whatever we cannot use, we donate to schools or to other people who may be in the business of making small accessories so that they can use it. But another thing, and this is where I disagree with, I forgot your name, I'm sorry. Andrea, is that she speaks about, for example, using something from Nike, like a workout gear that is spotted. I'm unapologetically committed to natural fibers in everything, even if the life of it is shorter than something man-made. And the reason why I say that is that you still have to think about how are you going to dispose of the thing. And I think that there is too much plastics and there's too much man-made fibers that we cannot get rid of that is in our environment and it's killing us. So if I have to replace my workout gear in a year and a half, knowing that it's going to be biodegradable, I would prefer to do that. I'm not suggesting that anybody else take that kind of approach, but that's the one I take, where everything has to be natural. If you come to my store, even the fixtures is either metal, wood, concrete, something that is biodegradable. All of my garments are made from natural fibers. I don't use anything artificial. The only way that I use something artificial is if I absolutely cannot find a natural thing to use. And so I have no other choice than to accept, like for example, sometimes you don't find the kind of thread that you want in cotton or silk. And so you're forced to use a polyester thread, which might be more durable. But generally speaking, I don't use any kind of man-made fibers or materials if I have a choice. Now to the question that you asked me. I think that designers need to learn as much as they can. Like for example, all of the patterns that are used in my collection are made by myself. And I can sew. I have people that I've hired to sew, but if somebody is absent or sick and I have to do something, I can do it. Like today I was making this coat, which speaks about manufacturing locally, but we'll get into later. And I was hurrying to finish it because I wanted to wear it here to make a point. And the lady who was sewing it was moving too slow. And so I jumped around the sewing machine and I finished it myself. And the fabric was a crew color. And I threw it in the dye vat and I dyed it black and I walked one block to the laundromat and I threw it in the dryer. And I had my coat ready to be worn. If I was supposed to be producing it somewhere else, that would not have been possible. So we will get into the benefits and the cost-benefit ratio of manufacturing locally as opposed to overseas. But
well, manufacturing for yourself.
No, we manufacture for other people.
No,
But we'll get into that later because I want to speak to the question that was asked rather than going off on a tangent. Yes, they need to learn as much as they can. And you need to look at it from the perspective to see that you are your most important asset as a designer and a business owner. So you got to take care of yourself physically so that you have the stamina and the ability to function. You have to organize your workflow to maximize efficiency. Like when I started out, I had no money. And sometimes I still don't, but that's not the story. And I had to do everything myself. If I wasn't as versatile as I am, then I couldn't do business. Because if I had to hire a pattern maker for $120,000, I wouldn't have the resources to pay them. You know, if I had to hire someone to sketch, I wouldn't have the resources to pay them, at least initially. And so I had to learn how to do as much as I can for myself. And that serves two basic purposes. As I'm saying, if someone is absent or you find yourself in a position where you have to function in that capacity, you can do it. The second issue is that if you hire somebody to do something, you know whether they're doing it to a respectable level or not because you know what it takes. So the young designers must learn how to do that. I see designers all the time who, they're just coming out of high school and they don't know much and they want to go into business. I think a lot of us really need to check our egos at the door. I had to learn that the hard way and focus on the small stuff that are just as important as the big stuff and make sure that you do those things and focus on efficiency. There is a concept called lean manufacturing. I don't know how many people know about that. It's an American concept that was developed in Japan and made Toyota the most efficient and profitable car manufacturing company in the world. And I apply some of its principles to my business and it has served me well. Where you try to solicit orders before you go into production. You try to organize your workflow so that there is no gap or time wasting in the process. Like you're making patterns and things that you can standardize. You standardize, so you increase efficiency at every step of the production process. So that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, you're making some pants and, oh, I didn't get the zippers. And so you're stuck with pants half done and you have to figure out what you're going to do until the zippers arrive. I try to buy as much as I can locally so that I don't have to wait on something coming from overseas that might be stuck in customs or it comes wrong and I have a problem. So those are things that you can look at as young designers.
Thank you, Zan. That's really interesting, and it takes me on to what I want to speak Maria to talk a bit about is for these young designers who are learning the industry, learning about sustainability, learning how to do better.